think builders need to hear what 45L means as far as dollars. If you are a contractor and if your house is Energy Star certified, that's $2,500 tax credit. Those are real dollars.
This is the one and only, the original podcast where you can find yours and your business's true value. You're listening to Our Value.
Brought to you by America's insulation source, IDI Distributors.
You want to hear from the best contractors, suppliers, and consultants that dedicate themselves to more than just survival in the business world?
Industry professionals that are dedicated to excellence in every aspect of their business.
Our Value has them all here to share that same motivation and knowledge with you. Tune in and grow a more successful, profitable, educated, and recognized business. Listen to the Our Value podcast to become the industry leader in your market. Find your value with Our Value.
Well, welcome to today's Our Value podcast. Today, we are reaching out to RESNET because more and more and more, I am having contractors that are being challenged on things that they've done for a very long time, and code officials are looking for something different. In fact, 3 times this week, I had contractors who had code officials who had either changed out from the old guy, or somebody was brought in, or they went to a training where the game had changed and all of a sudden the rug got pulled out and they were in need of a report because they could no longer do business as usual in the manner that they had been insulating homes. So with that, we have one of the key people from RESNET, which is Residential Energy Services Network. Her name is Cardice, and she actually comes from the insulation industry and went over there. We sent her over there to infiltrate RESNET. Actually, that's not true. I'm pretty sure RESNET reached out to her. Cardice, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic, Ken. Thanks for having me. And it is such a pleasure and honor to step back in the world of insulation that brought me to the party. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, give people some background because you did not come from a tiny little insulation company. Let some of the people know what your experience was with insulation.
So, Cardice Howard, for those of you that don't know me, I started my career in the insulation industry in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in about 1991. And I went to work for a small little company, and that small little company was bought by Garland Insulating. So I worked for Garland Insulating for several years, left Garland Insulating, worked at some other competitors for some years, I won't name them, and full circle came back to Garland Insulating and was there until 2017. So spent over 25 years of my life in the insulation world as an insulation contractor, which I enjoyed thoroughly.
And in the end, across Texas, how many trucks did Garland run across the state? I know it was more than 50. What did you guys have out there going?
Oh, wow. We probably ran just a little less than 50 in DFW when I left. So I would say Garland Insulating's footprint when I was there was probably over 100 trucks with the varying locations. They were in Dallas-Fort Worth, of course, Houston, College Station, and they had a branch that serviced the San Antonio, Austin area as well.
And I know while you were doing insulation, one of the big things that you did was really bridge the gap between the HERS rater and your company. You actually sought them out and used them. Is that correct?
So yes, that's correct in a sense. So how it all came about. So I always had like a very different approach to the industry. I kind of thought that maybe I kind of thought out of the box a little bit, and I had the opportunity while I was at Garland Insulating to be introduced to Steve Baden, the executive director at RESNET. And so we fostered a relationship, and I kind of shared my ideas with him as an insulation contractor. And I think he thought, you kind of do think out of the box. He encouraged me to participate on their board. So I was actually the first installation contractor that sat on the RESNET board of directors. And that was a very good experience for me.
Well, and you also used the raters in your area, though. You tended to work with them to get projects through, to do things a little differently. It wasn't they're on that side of the fence, you're on this side of the fence.
That's correct. So as that relationship developed, and I learned more of how raters, fit in our industry. So actually, for a lot of builders, Beazer being one, Dries, K. Hovnanian, I did a lot of training on the job site with raters. We would all come together, electricians, plumbers, insulators, all come together on job sites to do some on the job training, how each contractor affects the other contractors, the long-term goals of the builder and what the builder's trying to accomplish, and how your work affects the next guy's work. And the raters help bridge that gap between the contractors. And I, got to work with a lot of the raters in the DFW Metroplex.
Well, and that's good, because once you can get your the process down of the build and who's doing what on what day and all of that, if you can bridge all those gaps, maybe knock a day off the build cycle, maybe not, but certainly decrease the finger pointing and get it to pass the first time, you're really making it over some hurdles there.
That was the goal. If you are failing inspections, and we all fail an inspection, but if you continuously fail the same inspection and you continue, it's between you and other trades and things that are going on, because we're all working for the same builder and we're all in the same builder's house. So if we are continually failing the same inspection for the same thing, we all need to come together and figure out how we can do this better. And that was the goal.
So what made you then go over to RESNET? What created that, and why RESNET?
So in 2017, my journey as an installation contractor was shifting. And that shift was probably a little sooner in my career than I had hoped it to be. But my long-term goal in the industry, after I kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, retired from being an installation contractor, I had hoped to work for one of the industry organizations. And being that I was on the RESNET board, RESNET was attractive to me. Well, it just kind of all happened at the same time as my career was shifting. RESNET was seeking an operations manager. And so they reached out to me to let me know that they were seeking an operations manager. And so I, of course, sought out that position, and I was hired for that position. So I became RESNET's operation manager in 2018.
Now, since that time, you guys have worked on quite a few things, but this new one, this Texas bill, the HB 3215, that seems to really be a new pace that you guys are setting. Can you talk to people about that? Because while it may not be in the rest of the country, I would certainly guess that this is what's coming to many places.
So as I stated, I came on RESNET in 2018 as operations manager. And then in 2019, I was promoted to deputy director. And since that time, some great things have happened. A lot of initiatives that we worked on, and particularly in Texas. Last year, June of 14th of 2021, House Bill 3215 was signed into law by Governor Abbott here in Texas. It was signed into law during the 87th regular session, and it's a new law in the books. And the state now recognizes the home energy rating system, HERS index score, as a standalone compliance pathway to meet state energy codes.
Now that's unique, because just this week I had someone in Tennessee, and the code official is debating whether or not they would accept an ERI or HERS rating. They're almost trying to hybrid between prescriptive and something else. So what you're saying is, Texas is really the first state to come out and say statewide, every jurisdiction we accept this rating as a path.
That is correct. And it's of course great for RESNET because hers is a RESNET product. Right now the state of Texas has three energy codes: 2015, 2018, 2021, and 2024 is going to be coming on. Here in probably the next 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. And that's confusing for builders. It's confusing for contractors. You have large builders and even some of the regional builders that are building in more than one municipality, could be building in the same county. And just depends on where you're sitting in one county. You may have two different energy codes, which makes it extremely hard to build a consistent product. And especially for production builders, if you're trying to maintain cost, it is very advantageous of you to be able to build a consistent product. House Bill 3215 being signed into law in the state of Texas allows builders to do that. And I want to add that this bill was signed into law for 10 years. So this gives builders a long time to plan and plan effectively.
So it's kind of like a stretch code where they're starting at one number and decreasing those numbers down over time to a something that's closer to, say, the 2021 code as opposed to the 2015.
Yes. So like right now, okay, and Texas has four climate zones, right? So right now, let's just take climate zone 3 in the state of Texas. So as of today, if you want to use House Bill 3215 as your code compliance pathway to meet code in the state of Texas, you have to have a HERS rating of a 59. And that is good from today going forward to August of 2025. And then, so at September 2025 through August of 2028, that number decreases to 57, which means your house will be more energy efficient. And then on or after September 2028, the number goes down to 55. So again, you've got a sliding scale. Builders don't have to have this knee-jerk reaction because things have changed so drastically, and it gives you time to plan your business.
How does the HERS score differ from the energy rating index?
So the HERS score has actually, it's been completely pulled out of, okay, well, let me go back. So the previous law leaned more towards the IRC's version of the ERI. The House Bill 3215 totally separates the ERI pathway from the HERS pathway. So it's completely a standalone pathway.
And it's calculated slightly differently, is it not?
Yes. There's a blower door, there's more, there's pre-drywall, post-drywall testing. There's a blower door testing also with HERS index. And also it's more than, checking a box. You truly have a certification that says my home is energy efficient because of this score, and this is where the score is.
Now, along with that, I know that there were some changes 2015, 2018 in certain jurisdictions. The ICC recognized HERS raters to go do part of the IECC checklist. At this point, there is a new designation where raters can act as code officials in many jurisdictions, correct?
That is correct. And that designation is, and it's a mouthful, so bear with me. It is the IECC HERS Compliance Specialist. And this specialty designation combines energy code knowledge that's required by jurisdictions with deep energy efficiency and building science knowledge to recognize individuals qualified to conduct energy code plan review, inspections, testing, so on and so forth. And this designation is not to replace code officials, it's to work alongside code officials, because typically code officials' job was for structural safety and not necessarily energy. So we're trying to bridge that gap to make sure all aspects of the envelope are covered, and also as our with all of our with all of the different jobs in our industry, code officials the same way we are struggling with labor. I can't recall the average age of code officials, but I think it was like the high 50s or low 60s, and we have a lot of code officials that are retiring. So with this designation, we're also helping with bridging that gap of a labor issue.
Yeah, I was told there's quite an aging out issue with code officials, and that many jurisdictions really wanted to rely on this so that the rater could take part of that burden. And because of the fact that you alluded to it before, because you're actually doing blower doors, you're running tests, and you're not just checking boxes, it's a lot more than just a visual, okay, you can go ahead kind of thing. So it seems like a great move for some of these municipalities that don't have the young people staying in their area. Especially you get outside of Dallas, Fort Worth, or somewhere like that, and you're in a smaller community and nobody really plans on staying around and taking over that position. So it just seems like you can then have a business owner or a business person there that steps into that role, but really has, I guess, something to stand on to say, hey, I didn't just give my buddy a pass.
Exactly. And this designation, this comes from ICC. It's an ICC issued designation. So, you first have to be a HERS rater or a RFI, which is a rating field inspector. So you have to be affiliated with RESNET, be a HERS rater or a RFI. And then that certified HERS rater or RFI must then obtain the ICC's residential energy inspector plans examiner certification that a code official would obtain. So this is not a watered down version. I mean, these people have to go through the same exams and testing that a code official would normally go through.
Well, that sounds great. Now, I know you guys go out and do things to educate the public on this. I'd seen in Texas, you're doing lunch and learns for architects, builders, insulators, anybody really that wants to come. So who's really coming to the lunch and learns, and how are they receiving it? What kind of feedback are you guys getting?
So who's coming? Well, we've been very pleased with the amount of participation we've had to date. And to date, we've met with over 500 people across the various events. And we had 26 events scheduled. As of Wednesday of this week, we had conducted 20 of them. So we have 6 left. And the people that you mentioned earlier, I mean, we've had of course, builders in the audience, code officials, contractors, architects, some manufacturers, some distributor reps, and we've had local raters also accompany us and have added to our discussions, and they've been received very well. One of the things I would like to share is that we are working in conjunction with TAB, Texas Association of Builders, to conduct these lunch and learns. And a feedback we got from our contact with TAB was RESNET's House Bill 3215 training class has the distinction of being the only class that we have offered in the 18 years that I have been here to hold a class in all 26 of our local HBAs, except for our every other year construction contractors class that is mandatory.
Wow, that's outstanding.
It's great. We were very pleased with that. When we first started, we were contracted with, it was either 16 or 17. And we were very pleased with that number. And as we started having these lunch and learns and word started to spread, the additional home builders associations that had not contracted with TAB to have RESNET conduct the Launch and Learn, they also contracted until we got all 26. So very pleased with the participation we're getting from the Texas community. So they are wanting to understand this. And I mean, I like it. I mean, a builder goes to this meeting and he calls a builder friend that's, 3 or 4 counties away from him and asks him, have you heard about this thing? And they're going to be in your area in 3 weeks. So that's how it grew, and very fortunate, and I'm extremely pleased with the feedback that we've received.
That's great. And then I know we'd talked before about this is also an easier path to get their tax credits.
Yes, it is. And just like the House bill, it was signed and it was for 10 years. And so we're like 2 years into it. Part of the Inflation Reduction Act 45L tax credit is in that. And it's also been extended for 10 years, which is great, because before they would extend it for a year, they were extended for 2 years, but now it's been extended for 10 years. And I believe it's retroactive 3 years. So builders can still take advantage of it going 3 years back. RESNET was active in working with the House and the Senate on the tax writing committees on the 45L reform and extension. And, right now, if a builder in Texas, if they are Energy Star, or if they're getting a HERS rating, this is just money on the table for them.
No doubt about that. When you look at working with builders and setting yourself apart as an insulator, what do you think is the best way to really set yourself apart when you're working with your builders?
And I think builders need to hear, and contractors need to hear, what 45L means as far as dollars. So if you are a contractor, or if you are a builder, and if your house is Energy Star certified, that's $2,500 tax credit. $5,000 for homes that are labeled net zero. Also for multifamily, if you're Energy Star, that's $2,500 per unit. Those are real dollars.
Yes. The only caveat to that would be that if I'm on multifamily, I need to pay prevailing wage, which, currently the Fed hasn't set that. But on multifamily, it requires prevailing wage. And then the $5,000 is net zero ready. You actually don't have to quite make it to net zero, but you certainly have to have the house prepared to be able to generate power.
Yes. And thank you for correcting me. Yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, though. It's financially, it only makes sense. This is the number one reason to go out and really air seal and have a better building envelope and follow the Energy Star checklist.
Exactly. Great opportunity for builders.
It is. Let me go back to that one question, though. For you, I know you did really well at approaching and working with builders. So for insulators, what's your best advice on how they set themselves apart when working with builders, or working with raters even?
So my approach, and I wouldn't say that this is something I planned. I think it just organically happened. Because I'm like a people person, so I would talk to people all the time. So I worked very closely early on in my career with all of the installation manufacturers. I worked very closely with all of the distributors in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And the reason I did that is because every time there was a new product that came out, I wanted to know about it. I wanted to test it. I wanted my installers to test it, because I felt as if I knew what was new and innovative. I could share that with the builders. And that was always my approach. And another approach I had, with builders is I would always walk, if I wanted to call on a builder, I would take it upon myself to walk their houses even before I called on them, because I wanted to see what my competition was doing, what they were doing right, what they may have not been doing right. And I wanted to have solutions for the builder when I approached them. So that's kind of how I approached the market.
Now, with the raters, because obviously we want our insulators connecting with their local raters. That's, how they're going to move this forward and maybe get it done in their state. When you think of the best way to work with raters, you can obviously talk about the envelope, talk about the sizing of the mechanical, ventilation, rebates, and all of that. What do you think's the best way to approach them? Do they have a local meeting and you just go grab them and take them to lunch? Or, if you were doing this all over again, how would you approach them?
I would approach it the same way I did a long time ago. All builders get inspections. You know who your builder is using. If they're working with a third-party rater, ask them who they're working with. Find out who their third-party rater is. Call them. Ask them if you can meet them at the house. Ask them what they like that you're doing. Ask them what they don't like. Have lunch and learns at the houses with the rater. If you have insulation installers that are having problems, this is a good training opportunity. The raters would love to help even train them. I did that all the time. And it bridges a gap. It brings you closer to the rater, and it lets the raters know that this company gets it. These people understand. They want to do a good job. Because in the end, everybody can say every day, I want to do a good job. I think generally people do want to do a good job. And at the end of the day, we all want to deliver a good product to the end user, which is the homeowner.
If I'm in a state where, or let's say I'm working with a builder that doesn't use a rater, is it pretty easy to have a conversation with those guys to say, hey, you really need one? They're going to help you get these rebates. Besides that, there's other things they can bring to the table, or?
So, when I started early on, there wasn't, there was no such thing as a rater. When I first started in this industry, we just worked with code officials, and I would have the same approach. I would go to their offices and ask, and because they all have meetings. So I would contact them and ask when did they have their meetings. I would ask if I could come and sit in as an installation contractor to find out what their pain points were from my industry or from my installers in particular. And then as an installation contractor, with 45L or any of these other initiatives, you should let your builder know about these. This doesn't have to come from a rater or from any other outside source. As an installation contractor, educate yourself. You bring this to the builder. The more you can bring to your builder, the more your builder is loyal to you because you're solving his problem, especially if you're telling him, hey, well, maybe if you put R15 in your wall instead of R13, it may cost you $600 more, but hey, you can apply for this tax credit.
Yeah, I think it would be good for many of these guys to really understand how a rating works and how you get the points, because that's the kind of information that you can give in that kind of situation.
And it's all about trade-offs.
It is. And really what I was getting at is how do they try and build the same thing that you guys got in Texas in other states? Can insulators really help you guys move this forward in other states so that they have more compliance paths that are recognized?
Well, that question is probably ahead of its time because, of course, everything is bigger in Texas, and what we found in Texas has been great. We are actually collecting data now to determine if we move forward in additional states, which states would be the next ones to move forward in, and how do we do that? So that is something that we are looking at right now, and we're still collecting data on that.
Perfect. Now, one of the last things I wanted to go into, so enforcement, the Inflation Reduction Act includes $1.25 billion to motivate communities, code officials, really to trend towards the 2021 code, and enforcement is coming. Are you guys seeing the same things that we're seeing out across the nation?
We're just beginning to, because I think, like everything that's government related, and not to speak bad about the government, but, it takes time for them to roll things out. We have to get all the rules in place first. But, for some of these local offices where you have maybe one or two people working and you just going to have, I don't know, $10 million dropped in your lap. I mean, what do you do with that? That's gotta be a slightly overwhelming feat for them.
Yeah, I would think so. If you don't, well, the whole Inflation Reduction Act, if you don't have people in place in your state to give the money away, you're going to take a while to get it out.
Yeah.
And these enforcement things, if you've got, if you're struggling to meet the 2015 and they're trying to get you to bump to the 2021, you're going to have some issues with doing that. And then you've got to kind of rely on RESNET and other people that have been dealing with that information in order to move the ball that far. Now, you guys have you mentioned a trends document that you guys do, or you do something with trends on the market?
We do. We do a yearly trend, and actually our 2022 trends is just being finalized, and I think it will be released on or about June 1st. We do an annual trends report.
And do they just go to the RESNET website to find that?
That is correct. RESNET.us.
And what normally comes out in that document?
It shows, trends from state to state, trends over years, type of materials used, and just a laundry list of data. And if I'm not mistaken, it's like a 25 to 30 page report.
Before we get to Cardice's final thoughts, I wanted to share a bonus conversation we had after our interview concluded that was so good we had to find a way to work it in. Let's listen as Cardice shares her experiences with projects that she knew would be improved by a HERS rater.
Hopefully, these guys will do more with their local people. I think that if they all were on your team, it just expands the influence that you guys have, because they're obviously, going to be on every job. And I feel bad when there's not a rater, simply because, what it was this week was code officials were telling foamers they had to put in R60 and that they weren't going to take performance. And I'm just flabbergasted. It's like, wait a minute, what if it was a cathedral ceiling? Oh, well, then we'd approve 28. Whoa, time out. Hold on. And that's kind of the piece that I'm hoping to clear up, because now that the code official has to have a number, you only have two choices. You're either going to find somebody with software, or you're going to do exactly what the book says.
Yeah.
And what the book says.
It's interesting you said that, because I was in Marble Falls on Wednesday, and what you just said came up in the discussion in Marble Falls. And one of the raters, we had a rater there from Burgess and one from Fox Energy, and they were both, and I was like standing in the back of the room, and I could see their face, and their eyes were just getting bigger and bigger. And they were like, no, that's not correct. That's an issue. And they kind of talked the builder through it. And he was still so thoroughly confused. But, he got, with them, and they were going to follow up with him to make sure that he's not, number one, paying for something he does not need.
Oh, my gosh, to the tune of, an incredible amount. And yes. So for me, I look at this as, yes, there's an educational piece, but we have got to get people using the softwares, whether it's ERI, HERS, you've got to get them. I see prescriptive as Frank, Ed, and John get in the wagon while Mark pulls it to the
Oh
top of the
gosh.
hill. And, because Mark's got to do the R60, when the truth is, Frank needs to put in good windows. Ed needs to put in a good HVAC system. John needs to make sure that we didn't just leave no overhangs, no nothing, and just point windows into the sun. If those three do their job, there is no reason for George or Mr. Insulator to put R60 in spray foam on a roof deck.
I mean, the guy said, "Well, you're an installator. What do you think?" I said, "Well, you're not building houses in Minnesota. You're building houses in Texas.
It
You don't
doesn't
need an
matter where it
R60."
is.
I'm like, "You don't need an R60 anywhere."
Yeah, there is nowhere you need it. Well, okay, so
Oh my God.
I will tell you, when we did work with the Cold Weather Climate Research Center up in Alaska, it took 20 inches of spray foam underneath that modern day igloo to keep it from sinking into the ice. Everything sinks into the ice. The sun heats it up, blah, blah, blah. Well, what happened was that's when there was no longer any movement at all. We don't take buildings to zero transfer. There's a point of diminishing return. We cannot require, the build to be 2x12s in the walls. We don't require, there's so many things that we do not do. And so it's kind of funny if you've got cellulose and there's, some air movement in a ventilated attic, and okay, I understand. I understand why you want what you want. But when you go to a Yeti cooler, you're not going to buy a 6-inch thick Yeti cooler. You don't care if it, if one bag of ice stays in there 5 days, that's good enough. Well, that's 2.5 inches. If one bag of ice goes 8 days, but the cooler's 3 times the size, we've missed the boat.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of crazy, but we're seeing it more. My point was, I'm seeing it multiple times a week now because the code officials are starting to enforce. And I think it really is the IRA, the play behind the IRA, the money that's being offered.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're starting to change what they're willing to accept, but no one's taught them the real, prescriptive versus performance.
Yeah.
And the insulators got by with using 5 inches. Well, now you have to show it. Whether he needs a number of 59 or a number of 60, you got to do one or the other. So it's R60 or a 59, not R60 or foam gets special treatment. That's not going to fly anymore.
And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, but the software understands it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But we can't just start giving passes. The new rule is you need a number, and you need a number. It's either the prescriptive or the software one, but you need a number.
Yeah. And, prescriptive, like you said, pulling the wagon up the hills, like, oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, it's everybody else getting the wagon while George pulls it to the top, and it's just, that doesn't make sense. No, that was never the intent.
Yep.
But if you want to take that path, well, then that's your number. So, and I know it relaxes in the 2024, but still, even at an R49, an R49 of open cell foam on a roof deck is still beyond anything necessary.
Anything. And it makes absolutely no sense. It's like pouring water into a glass that is already full. It's just gonna spill out on the counter. You can keep pouring it and pouring. You just it's like throwing money out the window.
Well, Cardice, thank you so much for clearing some of this up and talking about what you guys got going in Texas and how insulators can work with raters. I just think that they could have a much closer relationship nationally and work together to help these builders obviously take advantage of the rebates, but really to just become closer at the job site the way that you did with yours?
It's I know it can seem overwhelming, and it's not. And I think a lot of people think, oh, they're a rater, and it's all building science, and they're so much smarter than me, and I don't want to seem stupid, so I'm not going to reach out to them and ask. That is all a perceived misconception in your head. Please work together. Please reach out to your raters. And if you're in an area that does not have raters, reach out to your code officials. They are willing to help you, very much willing to help you.
I think that is good advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. For those of you out there in the land of the R-Value podcast, thank you so much for listening. If you have questions on this podcast or any of the products that IDI carries, please reach out to your local branch, your local sales rep, or any of us at the corporate office, where we look forward to earning your business every day.